Imagine this. There's a man who thought he had everything figured out. He's confident in control and rarely second guesses himself. But then, seemingly out of nowhere, one woman enters his life, and suddenly his thoughts aren't his own anymore. He finds himself replaying conversations, craving her presence, and feeling a pull he can't explain. What just happened? Most women believe attraction is about beauty, charm, or even kindness, but that's not what makes a man obsessed. There's something deeper, something far more powerful that 99% of women overlook. And if you don't understand it, you'll never see the level of devotion and desire you truly deserve. But let's flip the script for a moment. Have you ever noticed that the women men chase the hardest aren't always the most conventionally attractive? They aren't the ones constantly available, overly accommodating, or seeking approval. In fact, it's often the opposite. And that's where the secret lies. There is a psychological shift that happens when a woman knows how to activate the exact emotional triggers that make a man feel like he's on a roller coaster, one he never wants to get off. When she understands this, she no longer hopes for love, she commands it. The question is, what is she doing differently? What energy is she embodying that makes her unforgettable? If you've ever wondered why some women effortlessly capture a man's mind while others struggle to keep his attention, stay with me, because once you learn this, everything changes. There is a moment in every person's life when something shifts, when an experience is so powerful that it leaves a mark, altering the way they think, feel, and act from that moment forward. This is not just memory, it's an imprint, something so deeply ingrained in the subconscious that it shapes decisions without them even realizing it. Emotional imprints are the silent architects of obsession, pulling at the mind in ways logic cannot explain. And once you understand how they work, you hold the key to creating an unforgettable presence in someone's life. Imagine a man who has been through life experiencing the same patterns, the same conversations, the same emotions over and over again. Then, one day, he meets someone who disrupts that cycle completely. She triggers something he has never felt before. Maybe it's excitement laced with just the right amount of unpredictability. Maybe it's a deep emotional connection that makes him feel seen in a way no one else has ever made him feel. Whatever it is, his brain registers this as new, as something worth holding on to, because the mind is wired to latch on to experiences that evoke strong emotions. The reason most women fail to create obsession isn't because they aren't good enough. It's because they don't create contrast. The human brain is designed to seek novelty and emotional depth. If every interaction feels predictable, if every emotion is expected, then the experience fades into the background. But when someone triggers an emotional high, the brain releases dopamine, making the experience not just enjoyable, but addictive. This is why certain moments stick with us for years, while others disappear into the blur of everyday life. Now let's take a moment to think about your own experiences. Have you ever met someone who left an imprint on you, someone who, no matter how much time passed, still lingered in your mind? Was it their words, their presence, or the way they made you feel about yourself? The truth is, we don't obsess over people, we obsess over how they make us feel. And the deeper the emotional impact, the stronger the imprint. What's fascinating is that this imprint isn't just about positive emotions. Think about the people who have caused heartbreak or disappointment. Even in pain, they remain unforgettable. This is because the brain doesn't distinguish between good and bad when it comes to creating emotional imprints. It only registers intensity. The stronger the feeling, the more permanent the mark. But let's shift back to the kind of imprint that builds obsession in the best way. the kind that makes someone feel like they've found something they never want to lose. It comes from understanding the delicate balance between presence and mystery, between making someone feel deeply connected yet always leaving a space for curiosity. This is not manipulation. It's the art of emotional resonance, of giving someone an experience so rare that they don't just want it, they need it. Now, here's where most people go wrong. They assume that to make someone obsessed, they have to be constantly present, always available, always pouring in effort. But the reality is, obsession is built in absence just as much as in presence. The moments of emotional intensity create the imprint, but it is the space in between that solidifies it. The mind fills in gaps with longing, with curiosity, with a desire to relive the emotional high that was once experienced. This is why people can become obsessed with a song, a place, or a person. They are chasing the emotional imprint that was left behind. Let's take a step back and look at a scenario. A man meets a woman who challenges him in a way no one else has. She is kind, but she doesn't overgive. She listens, but she isn't predictable. She creates moments of deep connection, yet never lets him feel like he completely has her figured out. Every time he thinks he understands her, she surprises him again. Not by playing games, but by being layered, by having depth, by showing different sides of herself that keep him engaged. He leaves every interaction with his mind still occupied, replaying conversations, wondering what will happen next. Without realizing it, she has imprinted on him. He doesn't just remember her, he feels her, even when she isn't there. This is where emotional intelligence comes into play. To create a lasting emotional imprint, you must understand not only what someone desires, but also what they lack. If a person is used to being admired but never truly understood, then making them feel deeply seen will be unforgettable. If they are used to control but suddenly feel vulnerable in the best way, that will be the moment that sticks. The key is contrast, the interplay between familiarity and unpredictability, between fulfillment and the space to want more. One of the greatest misconceptions about attraction is that it is purely physical, but true obsession is never about appearance alone. It is about emotional depth, about connection, about creating an experience that is impossible to replicate. And this is why some people, no matter how physically attractive, are easily forgotten, while others linger in the mind forever. It is not about being the most available. It is about being the most emotionally impactful. Consider the stories that captivate us, the movies that stay with us long after they end. They don't just entertain, they make us feel something profound. They create tension, release, anticipation, and emotional highs and lows that keep us engaged. The same principle applies to human connection. The relationships that leave the deepest marks are not the ones that are smooth from start to finish. They are the ones that take us on a journey, that make us feel alive, that challenge and excite us in ways we never expected. So if you want to be unforgettable, if you want to create an emotional imprint that lingers long after you're gone, you have to move beyond the surface. You have to understand what makes a person's heart race, what makes them feel truly alive, and then bring that experience into their reality, not by forcing it, not by overcompensating, but by being so deeply in tune with your own energy that your presence alone becomes a moment they can't shake. Imagine this. Someone hands you a book and tells you exactly how it ends before you even open the first page. No surprises, no mystery, no tension. Would you still feel excited to read it? Probably not. Now, apply that same concept to human attraction. Predictability is the silent killer of desire. The moment something becomes routine, the mind categorizes it as familiar, safe, and most dangerously, forgettable. But when uncertainty enters the equation, when emotions shift between highs and lows, when there's an element of surprise, suddenly obsession begins to take root. Think about it. Why do people become addicted to games, to challenges, to stories with unexpected twists? It's because the brain craves stimulation. It thrives on curiosity, on tension, on the thrill of not knowing what comes next. The same principle applies to human relationships. The moment someone can fully predict your reactions, your emotions, and your next move, their subconscious starts to disengage. But when there's an element of unpredictability, when they can't quite figure you out, when they're unsure what's coming next, something shifts. They lean in, they start thinking about you more. They become emotionally invested. Picture a man who meets a woman that excites him, challenges him, keeps him on his toes. One moment she's warm, engaging, making him feel like he's the only person in the world. The next, she's slightly distant, absorbed in her own world, leaving him wondering if he still has her full attention. This isn't about playing games, it's about understanding psychology. When someone feels they have fully secured something, they stop working for it. But the moment there's a hint of unpredictability, a sense that the outcome isn't entirely in their control, their brain kicks into high gear, trying to solve the puzzle. Now let's break this down further. Think about the concept of anticipation. The best moments in life aren't just about what happens, they're about what might happen. That electric feeling before a first kiss, the tension in a conversation where both people feel something, but neither one says it outright. The uncertainty of whether someone's next words will change everything. These are the moments that stay imprinted in the mind, the ones people replay over and over. Predictability erases that magic. It removes the excitement, the depth, the emotional pull. But unpredictability, that keeps people coming back for more. Let's take a quick reality check. Have you ever noticed that people seem to be the most obsessed with the things they can't fully have? The job offer that's just out of reach, the person who shows interest but also holds their own, the challenge that requires effort to win. The human brain is wired to chase what feels slightly uncertain. That's why unpredictability works. It creates a sense of value. If something is too easily attained, it's subconsciously devalued. But when there's a sense of earned connection, when someone feels like they have to stay engaged to maintain emotional depth, they become invested. Now, let's clarify something important. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing hard to get in a superficial way. It's about being someone who is genuinely complex, dynamic, and engaged in their own life to the point where they aren't just reacting to others, they're creating their own path. That's what makes unpredictability so powerful. It's not just about withholding or shifting behavior. It's about being someone who cannot be easily categorized. Someone with layers, someone who is both warm and independent, connected yet unattached, available yet deeply focused on their own growth. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, your heart pounding, adrenaline surging through your veins. You don't know what's coming next. Will you fly or will you fall? That feeling, that intoxicating mix of fear and excitement is what keeps people hooked. It's what makes moments unforgettable, what makes emotions linger long after the moment has passed. And yet, most people spend their lives trying to avoid the very thing that makes life worth living, the highs and the lows. But here's the truth. Emotional intensity is the key to deep connection, to obsession, to the kind of memories that never fade. Think about the moments in your life that you still replay in your mind. Were they steady, predictable, or completely neutral? No, they were moments that shook you. Maybe it was the exhilaration of unexpected success, the gut-wrenching pain of a sudden loss, the overwhelming joy of a long-awaited achievement, or the bittersweet pull of a love you couldn't quite hold on to. These emotional highs and lows are what create depth in experience, what makes something impossible to forget. Now, let's talk about relationships. Have you ever wondered why people become obsessed with certain experiences, certain individuals, certain dynamics? It's not logic. It's not because it makes sense. It's because those experiences created emotional imprints that were impossible to ignore. Someone who only brings comfort and safety might be appreciated, but someone who takes you on an emotional journey, someone who can make you feel both the depths of longing and the rush of excitement, becomes unforgettable. Picture this: a person who gives nothing but steady, predictable emotions. No excitement, no surprises, no tension. At first, it feels safe. It feels easy. But then something strange happens. Boredom sets in. The mind starts to wander. The connection starts to feel dull. Now, compare that to a person who challenges you, who keeps you guessing, who makes you feel intensely. One moment they lift you higher than you've ever been, and the next they leave you yearning for more. That unpredictability, that contrast between highs and lows, is what makes emotions addictive. Let's break this down scientifically. The human brain is wired to seek contrast. If there's no variation in emotion, if there's no fluctuation between joy and longing, between fulfillment and desire, the brain starts tuning out. This is why movies, books, and stories captivate us. They take us on an emotional ride. They don't just stay at one level. They rise and fall, creating tension, release, excitement, and suspense. The same principle applies to human interactions. If every moment is predictable, the brain disengages. But if there are emotional highs and lows, if there's an element of surprise, the brain stays locked in, constantly seeking resolution. Now let's get real for a second. Have you ever noticed that people tend to obsess over the relationships that weren't completely smooth? The ones where there were obstacles, challenges, moments of uncertainty? That's not a coincidence. When something is too easy, when there are no emotional peaks or valleys, it doesn't leave a lasting imprint. But when there's struggle, when there's tension, when there are moments of uncertainty followed by moments of deep connection, that's when emotions become deeply ingrained. Think about the most addictive stories ever told. They don't start with everything going perfectly. They begin with conflict, with struggle, with stakes that matter. The main character faces challenges, experiences setbacks, and feels moments of despair. But then, just when things seem lost, something shifts, a breakthrough happens, a victory is won. And that contrast, that movement from low to high, is what makes the victory feel so powerful. In human relationships, the same formula applies. If every interaction is stable, flat, and without variation, the emotional connection weakens. But when there are moments of tension followed by moments of intense connection, when there's contrast between longing and fulfillment, the bond deepens. People become attached to what makes them feel. And the strongest feelings come from the contrast between emotional highs and lows. Here's the part most people miss. This isn't about causing chaos or playing games. It's not about creating unnecessary drama or emotional manipulation. It's about understanding that emotional depth requires movement. Imagine a song that plays only one note over and over. No highs, no drops, no shifts in intensity. It wouldn't captivate anyone. But adding crescendo, sudden pauses, unexpected rhythms, and suddenly that song becomes powerful. It stays with you. It moves you. Now, let's talk about what this means for real life. If someone wants to create an emotional connection that lasts, they have to understand how to create emotional experiences that feel alive. That means embracing the moments of uncertainty instead of fearing them. It means allowing intensity to exist instead of always seeking comfort. It means understanding that obsession is built not through logic, but through feeling, and feeling is strongest when there's contrast. But the question remains, how does someone master this in a way that feels real, that strengthens connection rather than creating distance? And what are the exact moments where emotional highs and lows should be infused for the deepest impact? The answer lies in the psychology of emotional imprinting, in understanding how the mind processes experiences in a way that makes them unforgettable. And once that knowledge is unlocked, everything changes. Imagine walking into a room where everyone is seeking approval, clinging to validation, and desperately trying to be noticed. Now, picture one person standing in the middle of that chaos, calm, unbothered, radiating quiet confidence. They don't chase, they don't beg, and yet all eyes are drawn to them. Why? Because nothing is more magnetic than self-worth and detachment. The reason so many people feel powerless in relationships, in their careers, or in life is because they've unknowingly tied their value to external forces. They wait for someone else to tell them they're good enough, smart enough, beautiful enough. They wait for a response, for a text, for recognition, for something outside of them to confirm their worth. And in that waiting, they lose themselves. The irony? The moment they stop needing it, the moment they detach from that external validation, everything begins to shift. Think about a time when you wanted something so badly. Maybe it was a person, an opportunity, or an outcome. And the harder you chased, the further it seemed to slip away. It's because energy doesn't lie. Neediness repels. Desperation creates resistance. But the moment you step back, regain control, and understand your own value, the dynamic reverses. Suddenly, you become the one with the power, not because you manipulated anyone, but because you finally realized you never had to chase in the first place. This is where detachment becomes so powerful. Most people misunderstand what it truly means. They think detachment means coldness, indifference, or shutting down emotionally. But real detachment is the opposite. It's being fully engaged in the moment while remaining completely free from the outcome. It's giving your best without fear, loving without losing yourself, and knowing that no matter what happens, you will be just fine. That energy is rare. That energy changes everything. Consider the relationships that have left you the most emotionally exhausted. Chances are they were the ones where you placed your happiness in someone else's hands, where their response, their attention, their approval dictated how you felt about yourself. And that's the trap. When your self-worth is external, it's fragile. It can be taken away at any moment, leaving you in a cycle of highs and lows, constantly searching for something that can only be built from within. But the people who understand this, who cultivate self-worth independent of anything external, become unstoppable. They walk differently. They speak differently. They don't react to every little thing because they're not controlled by it. And the world notices. It's why the most confident, self-assured individuals often have the strongest pull. They don't need to prove anything. They simply are. Now, let's talk about what happens when someone embodies both self-worth and detachment. Suddenly, they no longer tolerate situations that drain them. They don't cling to toxic dynamics. They don't spend their nights obsessing over someone who isn't investing in them equally. They move differently, not out of arrogance, but out of deep respect for themselves. And that shift alone changes the way others respond to them. Imagine for a moment you're in a conversation with two different people. One of them is overly eager, overly available, hanging on to every word you say, trying to mold themselves to fit your expectations. The other is present but at peace, engaging but not overextending, connected but not seeking approval. Who intrigues you more? Who do you respect more? That's the power of detachment. It signals strength, confidence, and a deep understanding of one's own worth. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The moment someone stops seeking external validation, the things they once had to chase begin to come to them naturally. It's not magic. It's energy. When you radiate self-assurance, the world takes notice. When you no longer fear loss, you gain more than ever before. It's the paradox most people never realize. The less you need something, the more effortlessly it flows toward you. Now, this doesn't mean never wanting, never caring, or never loving deeply. It means doing all of those things without fear. It means being fully invested but not controlled by the outcome. It means knowing that whether someone stays or leaves, whether an opportunity works out or doesn't, you remain whole. That kind of energy is unshakable. And when you carry that into every aspect of your life, your relationships, your goals, your dreams, you become unstoppable. But the question remains, how does one cultivate self-worth so deeply that detachment becomes second nature? What are the key shifts that need to happen internally to unlock this level of confidence and ease? And what happens when someone finally steps into this power and starts attracting what was once out of reach? The answer to that changes everything.